He was a catcher.
Yeah,
I don't remember him being all that remarkable, actually.
Yeah.
I mean,
I don't either.
I remember
I
Al,
don't either.
the only Detroit Tiger I really remembered is Al Kaline. Wasn't he a Detroit Tiger?
Yes.
Yeah.
Then Detroit had a good pitcher who defeated the Cardinals in the 1968 World Series. Can't remember his name.
I don't know. So Ken's got a share screen thing on that. Why? There he goes. Much better.
Good morning.
Good morning, Marguerite. Good morning, Sergeant Zeltman.
Good morning.
Yeah, I wanted to assure that you could hear me. I can hear and see everyone, but I'm not going to turn the camera on today.
Okay.
No.
And why not?
No, actually, I'm driving, so
Okay, okay.
Oh,
I don't want to get in trouble, in legal trouble.
Especially with the sergeant on the call. Right.
Yeah, exactly. But I am on the car phone, so it's all legit.
Hi.
Rich, are you getting acclimated or?
I am. I'm starting to learn the ropes and
Mhm.
I'm getting acclimated during the busy season.
Well,
There's
that's good.
A lot of people around lately.
Uh-huh.
You haven't seen anything. This is extremely quiet for the busy season.
Yeah. That's what I heard.
Yeah. Yeah. Extremely quiet.
Hi, Linda.
Hello, how are you all?
We're doing well. How about you?
Very well, thank you.
Good.
Fuck.
Morning, Bruce.
Good morning. How are you doing?
Good.
Jay, it's 9 o'clock.
Is it 9 o'clock?
Yep.
Past
Yes,
9
it
o'clock.
is.
All right. Well, I guess we'll get started. I am Jay Brown, president of the community panel, and I would like to welcome everybody to the March 12th meeting of the panel. We'll do the roll call. I am Jay Brown, and here, David Mintz,
I am here. Thank you. Good morning.
Tony Lappy,
Tony will be here, but I think he's running a little late.
okay? Bruce McDonald,
Yes, here.
Ken Gill. Hopefully, Ken, I have not heard that he'll be missing it. Hopefully, he'll check in a few minutes late. Ken Suarez.
Ken
Here.
Gill is here, Jay. I see him on the screen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Linda Laird,
Here?
Marguerite Maville.
Good morning, I'm here.
Good. Ann Brady.
Good morning.
John Jensen. John Jensen.
I see him also. He's down there. He's just on mute.
Okay. And lastly, Sandy Stillwell.
I'm here.
Hi, Sandy.
Hi.
Okay, our first order of business is to approve the minutes from the February 13th meeting. Could I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I so move.
I'll
Do I
second.
have a second?
Second,
Okay, any discussion of the minutes? All in favor of approval, raise right hand, say yes.
Yes.
Aye.
Yes.
Any opposed? The minutes are approved. Okay, first up on the agenda today is update from our sheriff's office. Sergeant Rich Zeltman. Rich, you want to tell us about all the changes, all the issues facing Captiva this time of the year?
Well, I'd like to first update everybody from last month. I mentioned that there was a large teenage gathering on the beach. And so, just so you know, this month it was hit or miss. Last month, there were 2 Saturdays where we had large teenage crowds on the beach. There were underage drinking and some littering and some things that were happening. So this month, we've seen only 2 Saturdays where there were teenage crowds, but they were much less amount of teenagers that we saw the previous month. There were only about 30 teenage high school student age that were out there, and we made sure that we right away broke up the crowd and told them that there's not going to be any underage drinking or littering that's going to be accepted out here. So they dispersed and went home and went their way. This past Saturday, we didn't see any teenage students there. So either they got the memo or they're just going to wait until next week. We're still in the month of March, so it's still a busy season.
Mm-hmm.
It's our local spring break is next week, and that's the week that we're really going to pay attention to the beaches, because we find, most of the beaches in our area, mostly Fort Myers Beach when I had worked out there, that our local kids come out in big waves. So we're going to keep an eye on that here on Captiva for the next week. And I'd like the panel to keep an eye out too, that if they see large teenage crowds, just let us know and we'll be there to make sure that we take care of that.
Rich, do you get the feeling that that most of the spring breakers we get are accompanied by parents, or are they unaccompanied young adults?
Both.
Okay.
It seems like when they're out of towners, the parents will give the spring breakers some freedom and let them go around in a golf cart and let them roam around, because they think that Captiva is an area that's safe for them.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So we might find that some of these teenagers might be alone, and so just keep an eye out for that. And
Okay.
and then some are with their parents. If you were to walk the beach, you'll see teenagers with their parents as well.
Okay.
So I would say both.
All righty. Anything else to report on?
We did have a hit and run involving a pedestrian with injuries a couple of weeks ago on Andy Rossi. That's concerning because, as you know, with this month being busy and with the recovery and businesses trying to reopen, it's these roads are very, very busy with trucks, vans, wheelchairs, people walking, bicycles.
Yeah.
And if you don't pay attention, you're going to hit somebody.
Right.
And we don't want that.
Mhm.
So we just want to let your audience know again, I might sound like a broken record every month on this panel, but they have to really pay attention when they're driving.
Mm-hmm. Of
Because
course.
that car is just dangerous, and we've got too many people on the road, especially on a Tuesday when you've got the farmers market, because people are walking up and down Captiva Drive to the farmers market and then back to find parking, and it could get dangerous.
Okay. Were you able
Where
to
was-
apprehend the hit and run driver?
What was your question?
Or were you able to apprehend the hit and run driver?
Not yet. We do have some leads,
Mhm.
and the case was assigned to one of our detectives, our traffic detective, and he's actively working the case.
Okay.
Where
that's
was
another-
it? Where was it on Andy Rossi? Do you know?
It was one of the homes that's under renovations by Royal Shell. It's like maybe a third the way down from Captiva Drive towards, you got Captiva Drive and then Mucky Duck about a third the way down.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, I had one point. I noticed in front of my house and other places, there seems to be, like, now that some of this vegetation has been cleared out, seems to be an awful lot of people stopping and parking on the side of the Tweenwater stretch here, like much more than in the past. And I think we need to be sort of getting on that.
Okay, so people parking alongside the road,
Yeah.
leaving their cars.
Yeah, I guess it's probably fair to say, Jay, not like for a long time, but especially around sunset time.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
I mean, it just kind of bothers me having sort of cleaned out the vegetation and moved some rocks that were there to stop people from doing that, like to comply with the 2-foot rule. Now we sort of got people taking advantage of that. So
Right. I see.
I know, Rich, if you're there still, we lost your picture, but I think what Bruce is talking about, it's been self-evident, it's been evident to a lot of us that people during sunset are pulling over on the beach side of the Twin Water stretch for about 15, 20 minutes to watch the sunset. And people who are on bicycles or walking have to walk around the cars and into the street and onto Captiva Drive. And I think that when Mike was here in the past, that was sort of a priority to make sure that people obeyed the no parking sign on the Tween Water stretch and don't pull over to watch the sunset. It's not an area where they can pull over and just sit. And so I think that's what Bruce is talking about. So I don't know if you've noticed that, but that's something that has never been permitted on the Tween Water stretch in the past.
Yeah, if we don't enforce it, people are going to do it more and more, and we've already got enough of a traffic problem as it is. So,
and to be fair, I mean, I have seen the police when they're driving by, they are on it. So
I'm sorry.
Are you saying you'd like a little more effort around sunset time, Bruce?
yeah, I'd say just if we can just cruise along there, just for the deterrent factor.
I'm wondering, I mean, I would think a lot of the people who do that don't live here. And so,
Probably.
Police stopping them and saying something, it may be a one-off. But is there any possibility of signage along there?
There is signage.
Stopping, no.
There's no parking signs all along that stretch. And people will pull over right in front of the signs.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like they're either going 5 miles an hour on that road or
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
pulling.
25.
So I'm not sure which is worse, actually. I understand Bruce's point, but going behind people who are going 5 to 10 miles an hour because they're trying to see the sun as it's setting
Yeah.
is maddening.
David, I'm not sure I've seen a no parking sign in front of Bruce's house or my house.
They're there. They were before the hurricane, I know that.
I think they're gone.
All right, then maybe we have to put them back.
I think so.
Doesn't sound like the crime scene of New York City, though.
No, no, that's for
No,
sure.
I don't think we're
Actually,
we've reached that
actually,
point.
I don't mind them doing it.
We don't
You
have.
know, it's-
national
This is paradise. And,
Yeah.
you know, they're only there for 3, 4, 5 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, the solution though before was like we had some rocks that were within the 2 feet boundary and it wasn't an issue.
Yeah,
Now I would say it's like every other night someone's parking there.
the bicycle path initiative
Yeah.
ended up causing a problem.
Yeah, made it
Yeah.
easier for people to park.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I guess we're all encouraging.
I guess I guess since there's not as many iguanas to shoot, I guess I can get my yeah.
No, I think for the sake of the sergeant, I think, you know, as we get back to normal and we have higher numbers of people here, especially in season, people have a tendency to park in no parking areas, whether it be on the Twin Water stretch or anywhere that they can, because we have limited parking on Captiva. And I think that it's important that we just maintain the no parking anywhere on Captiva rules and not allow that to get out of hand, because if it does, people will park anywhere and then they start parking in people's driveways because they think nobody's home. They think that every house is a resort house and therefore it's open for parking because they don't realize there are permanent residents here. So I think it's a pretty simple rule. There's no parking anywhere on Captiva. And, you know, we looked the other way with construction trucks and workmen because we need to get the place rebuilt. And so we have looked the other way and we've been lenient with respect to reconstruction. But when it comes to tourism and day trippers, et cetera, I think we have to maintain the no parking at all times rule on Captiva.
Right, I would agree with that, David. So
There are two parking places. There's
Well-
Allison Hager up. There's Allison Hager up, and then there's Turner Beach.
That's correct. That's correct.
Right.
Right. And yeah, I mean, and then there's the businesses. Obviously, they can park in the parking lots of the businesses, but they can't park on the sides of the road and they can't park in people's driveways or et cetera. I mean, in the anyway, so that's we just point that out because as more people come here, you'll see that people just take advantage of that and ignore the no parking rule on Captiva.
David, the solution is just put up the signs again.
Well, we can do that. I'll make a note of that and see if they're gone. I'll call DOT about the no parking sign. Okay.
Just so you know, there are signs, but maybe not as many as there were pre-hurricane.
Right.
But there are signs, and we are enforcing the no parking along Captiva in front of Tween Waters in that stretch.
Okay.
But like one of the panelists said, there's so many people that are here from out of town take a quick peek at that sunset. They'll stop regardless of that sign, and so we're enforcing it, but it's going to be a continuous problem as long as there's a spot where they could pull into.
Right.
All right, but as long as we're aware of it, let's see how it develops and then.
okay.
Yeah.
Rich, do you have anything else for us?
I think that's it.
Okay, thank you for that report. Jeff Powell, are you here, our fire chief?
I am. Good morning, everybody. How are you?
Good, Jeff.
Hey,
What's
Jeff.
going on?
Oh, well, I just appreciate the conversation you guys just had because you saved me from a 10 or 15 minute topic of discussion. So
Okay.
obviously, as the sergeant said, we had two people, a bicyclist and a pedestrian, both get hit by cars in the last couple of weeks. So, as few people as there are, it's still busy. So, be careful. So I won't harp on that anymore. Same thing, just a point on the traffic being parked on the roadways. Mainly it's the contractors that we're getting calls about, asking us to make sure they're moved. We don't have that authority to tell people to move and, stop blocking the roadways unless they're in a fire lane. So if somebody's parked in a fire lane, then yes, we can go do it. But otherwise, the traffic situation is LCSO's issue. So call them or we can call them, whatever. But there has been a few instances lately where we haven't been able to get our trucks down the road as well. So, we feel all of your pain. Lastly, the only other thing I have, which I'm sure this doesn't affect anybody on this call, but if it does and you haven't paid your property taxes yet this year, there's still a large number of folks on the island who have yet to pay their property tax. So just a reminder, those are due this month. That's all I have, unless anybody has any questions for us today.
Yeah, where was the bicyclist hit?
Captiva, near Captiva Drive and Andy Rossi.
By where?
Captiva Drive and Andy Rossi, near that.
And it's right there. Okay, same area.
Yeah, on Captiva Drive. Yeah. So.
Thank you,
Okay, Jeff, anything further?
That's all I have, unless somebody has any questions.
All right, let's move on to CEPD update. Daniel Munt.
Jay, I'm not seeing anybody here from CEPD. If there is somebody on the line, can they raise their hand so I can elevate them?
Linda, can you give us a briefing?
Brief update. Yes, we're focusing on the referendum coming up for the bond so that we can proceed with the renourishment. That's going to require voting in May. We will be coming out with a communications packet on all of that. If you do mail-in voting, I believe you have to re-register for mail-in voting. The voting is going to be on Sanibel, not on Captiva, along with a Sanibel, another Sanibel election. So if you're doing it in person, it's going to be there. And if not, you need to re-up your mail-in ballot.
Okay,
We kicked off.
Do we know when the voting will be yet?
Yes, it's on May something, like the 23rd. I just don't have the number at my fingertips.
Okay, I think we should put out an email blast a few days before the voting, and also explaining that the voting location is different than where it's been historically.
Thank you. That'd be good, Jay.
Yeah, we put out a little bit of something to remind people about the mail-in ballots, but we can go more heavily into that as we approach the May 21 vote.
May 21. Okay. Also, we've kicked off the engineering study for the Bayside. So that's begun. We're forming a stakeholders team. And then we're going to be meeting with that stakeholders team. So that's ongoing. That should be done in a year's time. I think that's the highlights.
Okay, is Aptum going to do the Bayside study?
Yes.
Okay, and this is around a $500,000 study. Is that correct? Am I remembering?
Yes. Yes, that's all true. Okay, so
this is to develop an overall strategy for protecting.
This is to develop an overall strategy and how to go about it for protecting the Bayside. So things like the surges that hit us earlier this year on the Bayside, it's going to try to figure out how to ameliorate that for the Bayside. Okay. That's what's going on in CEPD.
And how do we feel about getting enough money raised to pay for the new renourishment without having to call upon the villagers to pay up?
We're still at 13 million. We expect to get more money. The bids have not come in. Within the proposals, we have sized it at one end, one size for however many cubic yards of sand, which I think is somewhere around 9. I don't know. It's a lot. It's the same size as the last renourishment. We are able to downsize it by 25% and still get the same rate on the sand. So we're going to get the bids, we're going to look at them, and then make the determination of what the cost of the project is going to be.
Okay.
Did that make sense to you, Jay?
Yes, it did, but we still don't know, though, whether or not the public is going to have to pony up.
My guess is,
funds
this is
ourselves.
my guess, is the public will have to pony up some monies. If we had, the Army Corps requires a lot of access, they would fund the whole thing. If we provide that kind of access to the beach, but we don't have that. We don't have that, so we're not going to do that. And we're working that in the future. Maybe it'll get better, but otherwise, we've got money from the federal government. We've got and we're working money from the state. We're working money from a variety of areas. I can just guess. My guess and Renee's guess is maybe 5 million, but that's a guess because
Yeah.
we don't have any bids yet. Okay.
Right.
And Sanibel, when they trucked it in, they were paying $90 plus per cubic yard. When we did it off the beach, it was more like 18 or 19 because we pump it in from the Gulf.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a $1 million setup charge, the initial cost for pumping it in, but we pay less because of that. What's the point on all of that? That was just telling you something, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to wait to see. All right.
Linda, I think there are two important things that Jay's hinting at here. I don't mean
Okay.
But I think that if you're going to put a ballot on and you're going to say you're going to bond for $25 million, it's absolutely important that people understand that it's not $25 million. That's going to be a tax bill for Captiva residents. And
exactly.
You're estimating 5 million. We don't know what the number's going to be exactly, but it's not going to be 25 million because you already have 13 million in the bank about this. Plus, I guess you have some reserves also. It behooves the CEPD to make it as clear as possible in their communications that people are not voting on a $25 million tax bill, but they're voting on something significantly less.
That is exactly right. That will be in the communications package. As I said before, the 25, the problem is that everything is paid on receipt. The grants give us money once the work is done. So from a cash flow perspective, we need to get bonds for 25 million such that we can pay the money when we can pay our vendors the money when it happens. And then we will get the grants coming back in to refund us the money kind of thing. So we need the bond for a cash flow reason because of the way this kind of business works. That's what we need the bond for. What we expect is it to be obviously very much lower if there is something that we are going to have the property owners on Captiva pay for.
Okay, all I'm saying is that that's got to be clear before people vote.
That's right, we agree.
Okay, the second thing I just want to say about this Army Corps of Engineer business. I don't think the Army Corps of Engineers in the past didn't state that they were not going to be able to fund all the beach renourishment because we didn't have access. I mean, there were two issues. They mentioned access, but the other issue was they didn't have easements from all the property owners along the beach, and they wanted easements which much greater than they had in the past. And
There are
and was also easements that people weren't so quick to agree to.
There are two issues. One is perpetual easements and one is access to the beach.
Right.
And the FSBPA, which is the Florida Shore Protection Group, is working with the Army Corps because lots of communities are protesting that. There are ways, so there's two issues, and I don't believe Captiva nor I would ever, what they're asking now is for perpetual easements for beachfront. We will not do, I can't imagine anybody giving a perpetual easement for the beachfront to the Army Corps. We've mostly have 50-year ones that were given in the 80s. But we've got two issues.
Yeah,
They both.
My point, Linda, is that I don't want people in the community to think that the reason we're not getting Army Corps engineering funding is because of access and access alone. I think there are two issues there. One, it's also because of the easement issue. So even if we had as much access and built parking lots, et cetera, we still wouldn't get money from the Army Corps because of the easement issue. That's number one. Number two is the way the Army Corps determines access is inappropriate for Captiva because we have a lot of people using the beach. They're just not public parking. They are renting homes throughout Captiva, and it's just the methodology that the Army Corps is using, which isn't appropriate for Captiva and underestimates the amount of beach access people have because they rent homes and they're still tourists and coming from other places. So I think I just don't want people to walk away from this meeting thinking that if we had more parking on Captiva, we would have more money from the Army Corps, because that's just not the facts.
Well, I think there are the two issues. I think that in terms of negotiating with the Army Corps, we'd be a lot closer if we had more parking. I'm not saying we should have more parking, but we used to get it. Let's put it that way. So I think there's these two issues, and they're in play right now with the Florida beach people.
All right, let's not beat a dead horse, but I think we don't have an infrastructure for more parking here. We don't have bathrooms. We don't have public bathrooms. More parking would create all kinds of issues. And I think if we ever, and I still don't believe we would get funds from the Army Corps, even with more parking. So I think that if there's any more, if there's any more to discuss this, we should have it on the agenda and have a full discussion with the community.
One of our plans is, and what we're discussing is, if we think the Army Corps will ever change their criteria. If we do not believe that, what we want to do is get our program out of the Army Corps needs to say yes or no to it. The Army Corps held us up for a year getting the other funding because we had to wait for them to say no. So if we believe we're never going to be able to get the funding from the Army Corps, then we are going to sort of decommission or deappropriate the project such that we do not go for Army Corps funding in the future. Those are the different paths through it. We're sorting out which way we want to go. Okay.
Well, I don't know if we reached a point where we're all satisfied.
I understand that we don't want to put more parking in on Captiva. It may be we could put in more what are they called? Maybe we can work with them how it is counted for the rental homes. Maybe we can work on how it is, what bicycle things. If we put up there's different possibilities on how to work it for access. We haven't been working that. The question is, should we bother, or do we? So there's different things in play here. What we do not want to have happen is next time we have an emergency situation, we have to wait to see what they want to do. That's what we've got to stop that, or have a good possibility of being approved.
Okay, well, I don't know where else to go with this subject.
I think the CEPD is handling it.
Okay.
Okay. I don't see anything exciting happening over it. Right.
Well, I think there is something. I mean, the CEPD may be appropriately handling it, but if there's an issue of access and an issue of the Army Corps of Engineers, whether it relates to easements or whether it relates to parking issues, I think that it's important that it comes back to the panel so that the community has an opportunity to weigh in on this issue. And it's not just an issue of funding for beach renourishment. It's an issue of quality of life on Captiva, dealing with its own infrastructure, et cetera. And I'm just saying that that is a broader discussion than just Army Corps of Engineer funding to try to lower the tax bill. I think it's something that we need to have a full discussion of, if and when it comes up, Linda.
If and when it comes that way, that will, I think having it discussed at the community panel where we have a much higher attendance of the personnel of people, or having some community meetings to discuss the options. If we could have been funded this year, it would have had a difference of probably somewhere around $8 million. So it's the community's decision in the long run if they want to do something like that. Not the CEPD, but that's a lot of money for us to pay in taxes.
Right.
And I
Well,
think
that's 8 million for the renourishment that we do every 8 to 10 years.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So it's like $1 million a year type thing. Then you could think about that.
Right.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Okay.
well, on this case, because we got 5 million, 13, we got money from other places, okay? But they would have paid for the whole thing. And they would run the projects the way they had, which is what had happened in previous, not the last renourishment, but the prior 2 or 3. That's how that played out. And so I think it is appropriate that the community, if we choose to go do it, if there looks like there's a way to do it, I don't think the new rules with perpetual easements, I can't imagine the community wants to do that. The rules seem to say that every half mile we have to have access. I can't imagine up and down the Gold Coast we're going to have access every half mile. On the other hand,
Linda, does it have to be public access?
Yes.
It does.
Yeah, so I can't imagine a lot of these are going to come true. And if that's the case, what we need to do is take us all, let's not go through the Army Corps that we have to wait a year for them to say no. But on the other hand, the community needs to weigh in to say if they want this kind of thing, because it's a lot of money.
Well, I think we should let's put it on a future agenda. To understand what are the criteria and what's the pros and cons.
Yeah, well, I don't think we're ready.
Is it even possible to meet the criteria? If it's
Bruce, I don't think we're ready to do that yet. Okay.
We don't know what the criteria are.
I don't.
Bruce,
Well,
that's been the problem in the
yes,
past.
we walked through the criteria yesterday at
Yeah,
the CEPD,
yeah, in the past,
okay?
criteria was a moving
But,
target.
and we
problem.
discussed it yesterday in detail. Supposedly it's changing. We're not talking about it for this renourishment. We're talking about renourishments in the future. So I don't think there's any, there's no urgency at this point.
Okay.
But Linda, what Bruce is asking, and I think it's a fair question, is there actually a document that sets out the criteria for Army and Army Corps of Engineer funding that people can take a look at? Because my experience, my recollection is that it was never particularly clear about whether you can meet criteria or not meet it, and then you would do certain things, and then you would then find out that you don't meet the criteria because the criteria was a moving target. So I think we need to get a sense of whether there is such a thing as criteria that guarantees funding if you meet it, and then we can evaluate what that criteria is. But in the past, I think we've had a tough time getting our hands on what exactly the Army Corps is demanding.
What we see, right, we have a presentation from 2015 when the Army Corps came in and told us why they didn't do it. We have the letters from them that said, we're turning you down this year for the same reason we did last year. So I don't know if it is completely objective. We can have the executive director come in and tell you the same things that he talked about in the last meeting. I don't think it's a decision point time, guys. That's what I'm telling you. Yes, we can come in and tell you all of this. I'm trying to tell you about it, but I don't think it's time for the decision. I think we have to sort of let things percolate for a while, see what happens within the state about the Army Corps. And then we can, because we've got 8 years or 10 years to worry this issue. We don't need to make any decisions right now, and things are going to change.
Okay.
Okay, any other comments on that? Now that we've got that perfectly resolved. Okay, let's move on to SCCF update. Matt DePaula, are you around?
Hi, Jay. Yep. Just got a quick one for you today. We had the end of legislative session last Friday, and things came out certainly better than they could be, but we'll have a couple of We'll have a couple of veto campaigns coming out. So keep an eye on your inboxes for that. The other big update that everyone's worried about is about the lake releases. We're in week 2 of their second 14-day plan for lake releases. What we've seen is the lake has started to come down, so they're staying in that intermediate band. So I don't expect lake releases to kick up necessarily, but they will be reevaluating, and we should have a new plan by this afternoon for further evaluation. And hopefully what we're pushing for now is just to make sure that the Army Corps stops prior to the start of the oyster spawn, which would have huge ramifications for the estuary. But right now
we're look at this point like we're going to have a major algae event from lake releases, or
so far it's been looking good. All the indicators are that red tide is not blooming, and this isn't feeding it right now. It's going to be important to keep getting those 0 days and for the Army Corps to stay responsive to any of those conditions changing. But things are looking as good as they can be right now.
Okay. Any questions for Matt? Okay, thanks for that report.
Thank you.
Matt, I guess that brings us to do we have Bob Walter around to provide us a South Seas update?
No.
Ken, would you do me a favor and get a hold of Bob Walter and determine if he wants to provide us updates?
Sure.
On a regular basis. I've reached out to them a couple of times and have not gotten an answer. So maybe you try, and then if we don't get anywhere, then we just assume we're not gonna get updates from South Seas.
Hey, Jay, I can kind of give you what I know
Yeah,
about what's going on there if you'd like.
sure, please, Ken.
Okay, so the resort's operating company Timbers continue to hold monthly webinars, kind of focusing on their resort operation and their rental updates, employee hiring, and so forth and so on. They also touch on the redevelopment plans and permits they have submitted. As we understand it today, there are 4 outstanding building permits that are out there. One particular is causing some controversy down at the north end of the resort. That is across the road from Seabreeze and Plantation House Villas, which is, I understand it, is a 3-story above floodplain golf cart rental operation and or maintenance and golf course maintenance facility in the same building. The building permit actually states that on the first level, there'll be golf cart parking, and levels 2 and 3 will be offices and bathrooms and so forth and so on. So that's creating some agita amongst the owners and Lands End, Seabreeze, and Plantation House Villas. And that building will be sort of adjacent to the Clutch, which is their golf course pro shop. And again, that permit has been submitted. I believe it was submitted last month, and the county is waiting for some documentation from them. There is another permit that's been applied for, and that was to replace the owner relations office. I believe the location there is the old executive office, but I don't know 100% if that's the case. And then the other two are I believe is the maintenance office and then another administrative office, but I don't know that for 100%.
Ken, well, the way I understood the process that was going on is they were developing a master plan, and that had been submitted to Lee County, and Lee County responded that there was not near enough, data in the request to properly evaluate it, and they were told to, go back to the workbench. So are you saying that they're trying to get approval of small elements of a master plan?
I don't know within their current zoning if they have the ability to replace these buildings or add new structures. It's unclear to me.
Yeah.
None of the permits have been issued, so I don't know if they're waiting on, final approval of their zoning application and or development order. I do find it interesting that they've applied for building permits, but they must have gotten some kind of clearance to replace buildings under the current zoning. And I would guess that in their development order, at some point, once they receive a zoning approval, they would have to deal with how those buildings fit within the overall development plan. But I really don't know how they fit into the current zoning application at this time.
Okay.
I'm trying to get more details on the application, but that's all I know. And they continue to demolish the Harborside Hotel Room 17 and 1800 building. 1800 building is basically done. They're working on the 1700 building now.
Which is 1800 building and which is 1700? Are those both hotels?
The 1700 building was the first one you come to as you drive north.
And that's a hotel, or?
Those were the 107 hotel rooms on the main marina.
Okay.
So they're having some success with renting units, although there's been also some service complaints by guests and complaining of false advertising and whatever, but that's what I have heard go around via social media and actually talking to other owners. Other than that, from what I understand, they have 125 or 130 different units that they can rent at the moment. And they hosted Nortec boats. They still may be there, but this weekend, if you were on the Gulf of Mexico and saw a bunch of power boats going by,
Right.
that was a group that was staying at the resort.
Okay, but that was a Nortec promotion of some kind, I guess.
Correct. Nortec's a local company, so.
Yeah, right, I'm familiar with them.
From what I understand, the provision store is due to open sometime maybe in April. The golf course, they're saying that maybe mid-April to early May. I know with the weather, they've had some challenges with the grass. It's a nice looking area. They've hydro-seeded a good part of the remaining space that's open that used to be the golf course between the four-way stop and the golf course. So they hydro-seeded that. Let's see, what else is there? They'll have another meeting coming up at the end of the month. But the webinars have they're slowly losing audience on their webinars. They've gone from a couple hundred people to the last count. I think there was somewhere a maximum of like 39 to 40 attendees on the last webinar, which was February.
Do you have any idea how many rental units there are that are outside the Timbers network of rental units?
I do not. I can only speak to my particular association, which I have 60 units in my particular association. And out of the 60, 40 are in their program. The other 20 are a mixed bag of rentals through other rental agencies and people who don't rent whatsoever.
Okay.
Over at Bayside, from what I understand, Bayside Villas across from my association has 102 units and 60 are in South Seas rental program.
Okay. Anybody have any questions for Ken? Okay, David, you want to take us through where we are on the legal challenges that the community is
Yeah, I'll give a
in
report.
process of?
Yeah, maybe we'll get some clarity on this. The Timbers, Wheelock Street Capital and Ronto, they're the three owners. They did submit a plan application to rezone the property. As we sit here today, the South Seas is governed by the administrative interpretation, which limits height on the resort to 35 feet above grade or 42 feet above sea level, whichever is lower. So if they're seeking permits, greater than 35 feet above grade or 42 feet above sea level, they're probably not going to get it until they get a rezoning. So that I think sort of addresses that issue. But they did submit an extensive plan application to the county for an increase in density from their existing 247 units, which was the 107 units at the large marina, the hotel units, and 140 employee housing units, which have been demolished. The employee housing units and the hotel units, I think the hotel units are still in the process of being finally demolished, but all the employee housing is demolished. So that's 247 units. What they're now asking for in their application is 707 units. 272 condominiums and 435 hotel units, 2 hotels, 1 at the north end, 1 at the south end. So that's their plan application that was submitted in.
Oh, that's right here.
That was submitted to the county. The county sent the letter back. I think I said this at the last meeting of the panel. The county sent it back and said that the application is insufficient, that there's not enough information being provided by South Seas about their development and their plans to have the county review it.
I believe so.
The county to review it and then to make a recommendation. The way this works is that once that plan application is sufficient, found sufficient by the county staff will then issue a recommendation, whether they support it or don't support it, or support it with modifications or whatever. That then will then be assigned to a hearing examiner. A hearing examiner will then hold hearings on the application with public input. The community will have representation during that process. The hearing examiner then will make a recommendation about the zoning application, and that recommendation will then go to the Board of County Commissioners in a public hearing where people will also have the right to have input at the public hearing, and then the county commissioners will finally decide if they will rezone that property, and if they rezone it, what limitations on density and height in that process. And so that is the plan application process. Our understanding from the county at this point is that their application was sufficiently insufficient that it could be between 60 or probably closer to 90 days before they will have an application resubmitted to the county. So that process has been slowed down significantly because the initial plan application was insufficient. The Captiva community is gearing up to be full participants in that hearing examiner process if and when that plan application is sufficient.
So that's a big part of our legal strategy will be to examine all the facts that are stated in their application. For example, what they say about the sewer capacity, what they say about capacity of roads to handle increased traffic and so forth. And we will be challenging all those with our own expert witnesses.
Exactly. That's exactly correct. I mean, one example is in their plan application, they advised the county that Island Water has signed a letter that they have sufficient water for the development project that is being proposed by South Seas. Truth of the matter is there was no letter from Island Water saying that the water was sufficient. Island Water doesn't have enough information to make that determination. So those are the kinds of things that the county noticed.
Well, didn't Island Water in fact write a letter saying that they didn't believe that there was enough water to cover the entire development?
No, what Island Water did is early on, they said they didn't have any information sufficient to make that determination.
Okay.
But with the plan application, South Seas advised the county that they received a letter from Island Water saying that there was sufficient water for the project. The fact is, our understanding is that Island Water did not provide that letter at all. But there, as you say, there will be issues about the sufficiency and the adequacy of the wastewater treatment plant to handle increased density and height. There'll be issues with our fire department, whether they could have the equipment to handle taller buildings. There'll be issue with environmental issues in terms of how you deal with treated effluent. If you have increased effluent, and where does it get dumped, into a deep injection well or into the bay? There'll be issues of traffic and evacuation. At this point, Captiva and Sanibel don't meet the state evacuation timing requirements to have safe evacuation, and this would only make it worse. So there's a whole series of issues that'll be brought before the hearing examiner with respect to this planning application. The most serious issue, I think, that we'll have to deal with in that plan application process is that it's the community's position that the development on South Seas is capped at 912 units. And it's been capped at 912 units since the property was downzoned in 1973. It's 3 units per acre, 3 times 304, so 912 units. And the county has maintained and enforced that 912 units since 1973 until this past year. And it is our belief that that 912 units, which was given and approved for South Seas, was in exchange. They downzoned that property in exchange to have clustering, small scale clustering, and to have flexibility in how they develop that resort. And they obviously got the benefit of that bargain over the years, selling off property, developing Bayside Villas, developing Lands End, developing various properties. And 912 units was always the condition upon that flexibility that they had in terms of developing South Seas. And now someone is coming in and obviously saying we want to
So
change.
what you're saying is we have a long ago standing agreement.
No, well, I'm not saying anything about the agreement here. What I'm saying is that there is a zoning that took place in 1973 that downzoned that property to 912 units. And what I'm saying is that 912 units was enforced by the county through the present day. And that 912 units was agreed upon as a condition of developing the property the way it's developed. And that people relied on that open space and that low density development when they purchased at South Seas, whether they purchased at Bayside Villas or Tennis Villas or built a house there or whatever they did. And what I'm saying is that what the county is going to have to deal with in this plan application process is the fact that there's been a long-standing zoning of 912 units that people have relied on when they purchased, and that was in exchange for the flexibility they were given back in 1973 to develop the property the way they developed it. And so that's one aspect of this, Jay, only one aspect. There is then a second aspect of the legal strategy, which is that and the Captiva community has filed a petition with the county, and now it's been filed with the department, will be filed with the Department of Commerce. And the position of the community is that the proposal to allow increased density and to allow increased heights, but particularly increased density to go from 247 units, say, to 707 units on South Seas is inconsistent with the community plan, our comprehensive plan, that the code amendments that the county passed, which exempted South Seas and only South Seas, not Twin Waters, no one else, exempted them from the 3 units per acre for hotel rooms and exempted them from the building heights that apply to everybody else on Captiva. We're saying that that violates the comprehensive plan. And we filed a petition with the county and we'll file it with the state, basically saying that the code amendments that permit this are inconsistent with the plan. People, if you go back to the Captiva plan, it says that the county must enforce development standards that maintain the historic low-density residential development on Captiva. The plan also says that the county must continue long-term protection and enhancement of community facilities and to continue the existing land use patterns. And the plan says under policy 2324, historic development pattern, county must limit development to that which is in keeping with the historic development pattern on Captiva. We have 50 years of 912 units on South Seas, and that is the historic development pattern. There's no greater evidence of the historic development pattern than the administrative interpretation that's enforced this. So that is the second legal challenge that we're making in terms of what's happening on Captiva, which is that the proposed increase in density and height is inconsistent with the plan. And the third thing that Jay was...
Which they had previously agreed to.
Pardon me?
It's inconsistent with the plan they previously agreed to, the county.
It's inconsistent with the plan that's in effect as we sit here today.
Yeah.
And so and now we filed that petition with the Department of Commerce, and as everybody knows, the Department of Commerce is in the past basically said the county was flying a false flag of resiliency when they really wanted increased hotel density. So this is the same agency that's now going to be reviewing this challenge that we've submitted, this petition. The Department of Commerce will issue a recommended decision in about 60 days. They will meet with both sides. And then whatever side loses in that recommended decision by the Department of Commerce will have the opportunity to file with an administrative law judge, and there will be a trial, a full-blown evidentiary trial over this issue. And that is the second area of legal challenge that where the community is involved in. The third area is a very interesting area. In 2003, the CCA, the Captiva Civic Association, filed a lawsuit against the county and against the developer Mariner Properties because they were proposing to increase density above 912 units. It was a lawsuit that was filed in Florida courts. The judge assigned it to a mediator. The mediator met with the parties. And the parties came up with a mediation agreement. And the mediation agreement was then submitted back to the court. And the court approved the mediation agreement and said that it would be enforceable. They would retain jurisdiction, it would be enforceable. All parties signed the mediation agreement, Mariner Group, the CCA, and the county. The county, before they signed the agreement, had to have bring it to the Board of County Commissioners, who voted unanimously 5-0 to support the mediation agreement. The mediation agreement in paragraph 3 says the total number of dwelling units on South Seas Resort is limited to 912 units. No building permits may be issued by the county for dwelling units within South Seas Resort that will cause that number to be exceeded at any time.
Wow.
And so that's the mediation agreement. It's 20 years old. How that gets enforced and what court that gets enforced in and how that happens is now being reviewed by our attorneys. And when I say our attorneys, I'm talking about a lot of attorneys. And we're going to figure out the best way to enforce that mediation agreement, because we think it's evident of what it just reflects everything that's been going on for the last 50 years is 912 units. So 912 is the number to remember. And so those are the 3 areas that we're involved with. We've created a legal fund, as everybody knows. This is the most amazing thing I think about this whole process, almost even more so than the hundreds of people that came out to the public hearings, is that 600 people plus, more than 600 people have contributed to the legal fund. And we haven't really made a big push yet. But more than 600 people in our community in Sanibel and Captiva have contributed to the legal fund, people even outside of in the other parts of the county. We've raised well over $400,000 already, and we're looking to raise, I think, 750,000 is a more realistic number as we go forward with this litigation. We may have 3 trials, and we will continue to do the fundraising. And if people on this call would like to contribute, just go to the CCA or Protect Captiva, and there's a mechanism in which you can contribute. So those are that's my report on where we are with the legal matters. I think I sort of repeated this a couple of times. It's sort of hard to get your arms around because it's complicated, but I hope everybody's got a pretty good sense of what we're trying to do, which is very simple. We're trying to keep Captiva as Captiva in the way it's been for the last 50 years in terms of density and height.
Well, David, it seems to me that, you know, with all the historical precedent and the fact that the county previously agreed that no more density would be granted to South Seas back, when was it, around 2000? I mean, how can they, and you've got this plan for what the future of Captiva is supposed to be so clearly established. I mean, I don't see how they escape this.
It's, It depends on finally, a lot of it is a political process. The questions that arise is, how long do these agreements stay in effect? Can the county change its plan? Can it change its code? I mean, these are complicated issues. I think they're gonna get resolved. I mean, you have a general court system that defers to the legislative rights of county commissions and state legislators. You have a Florida, which is generally pro-development. And so you're dealing with complicated issues with standards of proof, which are not the strongest. But all things being said and done, Jay, I think I would rather be on our side than the other side on this. I feel that we have God on our side here. With everything that we have is points to the fact that our code, our plan, our history, the history of South Seas protects the barrier islands by limiting density. And I think we have an obligation to try to maintain it. Do I think we have the better of the argument? I frankly think we do.
Okay, well, this is, everyone, the most important information you're gonna hear today, what you just heard from David, I think. I hope everybody on the panel understands, the legal approach, the arguments that we have. And if you don't, now is a great time to ask questions to make sure that you do understand what our arguments are and why we feel we can be successful.
Yeah. We've retained Richard Grosso as our attorney, who's the foremost, I think, in the state, one of the foremost experts in this area. Retained a law firm in Fort Myers, the Han Losa law firm, to assist and provide resources for us. We have attorneys from we're working with attorneys from Royal Shell and RLR who are supporting and working with us. We're working with attorneys retained by the associations on South Seas, the 10 associations that property, the majority of property on South Seas. We're working with the attorney that represents the timeshares and the 8 associations of timeshares on South Seas. And we're working with the city of Sanibel also. We have, I think we have the best legal minds working on this, working together, trying to do the right thing for Captiva. There's no guarantee of success here, but I think there's a guarantee that we have the best people working on.
David, are there any other attorney groups that are pursuing different avenues than what you outlined on their own?
I think as we go through the plan development process, in other words, when the application is sufficient, there'll be property rights issues that are very specific to South Seas, such as if you're going to develop on South Seas, are the appropriate easements to develop that? Is the appropriate stormwater system set up properly? Is there enough open space, buffers, et cetera, on South Seas? Those issues will probably be handled more specifically by attorneys representing the associations on South Seas, because that's more in their wheelhouse than the issues of density and height that we as a whole are representing all of Captiva, including South Seas, on those issues. But there will be very specific issues that will be handled, I believe, by there'll be divisions of labor, I guess is the best way to talk about it in terms of this plan application process. And different lawyers will have different areas of responsibility as we go forward.
David, the 2003, is that what you're saying with the mediation agreement? 2003, that was the key. That to me is I'm no lawyer, but that to me seems pretty good to have a sort of a tablet set in stone. A little bit sounds pretty good.
It sounds pretty good, and it was there. I mean, and it is there. It's 20 years ago. But, you know, it is an agreement and everybody agreed to it, so we'll see what the courts have to say. Predicting, I'm just saying that, you know, we're doing what we're using the contracts and everything that we have to prove our point, and this is a very powerful document. So. Okay, I want to move on to two other things before I have to go. Stormwater, we had the stormwater, remember we had Kimberly Horn doing a stormwater engineering study for the village to deal with all the flooding that took place. And it was a $200,000 study. We were told many months ago that the county manager approved this funding and that we would get the funding for Kimberly Horn to do the study. Kimberly Horn spent a lot of time preparing the study, working with the community to develop the scope of the study. The county manager then retired this past summer, and it seems like that information about approving the study didn't get communicated to the appropriate people. In any case, we brought it back to the attention of the county, and the county has basically agreed, the Board of County Commissioners last meeting, or I think it was last month, agreed that the study could be funded from CDBG-DR funds. Sandy knows what they are, I see her shaking her head, but it's Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery Funding. And so that they have put in to get some of that CDBG money for this study. They've asked for $225,000 to do the study. The county, basically the Department of Natural Resources, took the actual application forms for the CDBG money, and they've taken the scope that we had prepared with Kimberly Horn and incorporated that scope into the HUD. It's basically HUD. It's the HUD request for federal funds to do the study. And that proposal has been submitted to a committee which reviews all the planning applications. My understanding is that there's enough planning funding to cover this application. But what I found out last week for the first time, and it was a little upsetting, was that the consultant that created the scope of the project, which was Kimberly Horn and Molly Williams for Kimberly Horn, which worked very closely with the community in developing this panel and developing the scope of the project so that we can finally deal with flooding in the village on our streets, et cetera, et cetera. And how we're going to deal with the pollution that goes out into the bay when we have these storm drains that just empty the waters in the bay. That when you apply for CDBG funding, the parties, the engineers, the consultants that develop the scope can't apply and can't put in a bid to get the funding. So that the Kimberly Horn, who worked with us to develop the scope of the project, is not eligible to bid. After it's funded with the $220,000. So that obviously on its face seems very unfair and wrong, and that wasn't the intent. We were looking to get CDBG money. We were looking to just get allocation from some of the hundreds of thousands of dollars for resilience that the county received from the state. So that process of getting the CDBG money is still in play. It would be in the spring that we would get the approval, and then the money would come in August, and then bidding would go out and the project would begin. I am going to be meeting with people in the county next week because I want to see if there's another way we can get $200,000 to do the study other than CDBG money, because I don't think it's fair that Kimberly Horn is not able to do this project after they spent so much time with us developing a scope that met the needs of the Captiva village. So that's where we are. Either we're gonna probably get the CDBG money, or we're gonna try to find funds somewhere else so that Kimberly Horn can do it. Kimberly Horn's been advised by the county of this situation. I haven't spoken to them since then, but I'm sure they're not happy, though I'm sure they've heard of this before. So anyway, that's where we are on the stormwater management. I'm confident that we're gonna get funding to do it. I'm just not confident who's gonna be doing it. So that's number two. Number three, on the Captiva Drive vegetation, I just want to get rid of everything I can report on. I spoke to the Department of Transportation. They sent out someone, a landscape expert, and they came out to assess the vegetation that's growing along. They said that they sent out somebody that did some cutting back on some of the shrubbery, but I spoke to them yesterday and I said there's still a lot of vegetation that's growing over the shoulder that's forcing people into the bicyclists and pedestrians into the street. They have notified a number of property owners that they're going to come and cut back their property if they don't do it themselves. But I also said there's just growth growing, low vegetation growing on the shoulder that has to be cut back, and that's actually a 2-foot right of way that has to be cleared. And so they told me as of yesterday that they were sending somebody out to assess exactly how to do that, and we'll do that as quickly as possible. So that's where we are on those issues. I don't have anything more to report, Jay. If anybody has any questions, John.
Yeah, Dave, if you have to leave, coming up, we're gonna talk about the crosswalk. I think you probably have some insight into that at
Yes.
something Captiva.
Why don't we, Jay, can we talk about that?
Yeah,
now?
let's move to the crosswalk then.
Yeah, go ahead. John, Linda,
Yeah.
you want?
So we'd like to see if we could get a crosswalk between Sunset Captiva Bayside condos and the Gulf side homes. There's 10 condos on the Bayside with our marina, and then 59 homes on the Gulf side. So people are going back and forth using the marina. The Bayside folks are coming over to go to the beach. And it also seems like if people are walking that stretch, if they want to cross the road, they'd have to go up to the stop sign. I don't think there's a crosswalk like between the green flash and the stop sign. So I don't know what's involved. What's the criteria to get a crosswalk?
Yeah, I got a call from Linda, and I know you're involved in this, and I also received a call from another board member saying that the board supports this if it's possible to do. I am happy to call a DOT and ask them if they can place a crosswalk there. This issue has come up before. It came up in the context of the Rauschenberg property, who wanted a crosswalk where their property goes on both sides, on the Gulf and the Bayside. And it came up, and I don't remember the other one, it came up once before. The one issue I know that arises is there has to be enough space between crosswalks, or enough space between a crosswalk and a stop sign. In this case, it would be the crosswalk at Sunset Captiva and the stop sign at Andy Rossi. There has to be enough space so that cars can stop at the crosswalk, then go through the crosswalk, and have enough space to basically drive the vehicle safely from the end of the crosswalk to the stop sign. And there has to be enough room for enough cars for that to happen. And I don't know what the spacing requirements are.
Okay.
And I knew that when the Bubble Room, this is what it was the Bubble Room wanted a crosswalk between their little coffee shop, the Boops or whatever it's called, and the store across the way. They wanted a crosswalk there, but it was too close to Andy Rossi Lane to put a crosswalk there, because there wasn't enough room for a car to accelerate into Andy Rossi Lane and then stop right away at that crosswalk. I think there's more room between Sunset Captiva and Andy Rossi than there was, I'm almost positive, than there was between Andy Rossi and the Bubble.
Yeah.
So, but I just don't know what the footage is and what the requirement is. So I'll place a call into the Department of Transportation and ascertain exactly what the process is, and see whether or not this is feasible. But
It might be worth using the context that we've recently had 2 pedestrian and bike accidents.
Mhm.
Not at this location, but within 100, 200 feet. So I think that's important as well, that
Well, we
we're
have,
starting to have more issues with some pedestrian and bike accidents.
I mean, this whole sidewalk issue, which we put on the back burner because we're gonna do sewers and then we're gonna do stormwater, and we didn't want to dig up the road 3 different times. So all of this is coming to a head now. But yes, Linda, I will mention that this is a very pedestrian sensitive area.
Mhm.
Thank you, David. And let me know if I can do anything.
Yeah.
You know, I was just gonna suggest, David, that maybe you could try to involve John in this reaching out to them so that every time somebody has a problem that requires communication with the county, you're not the one that has to do it.
Okay,
Yeah.
I will set up a meeting, and then John, we've done this together actually on the vegetation stuff, and we could do it.
Yeah.
We could do it also on the crosswalk, but I will figure out who to talk to, and then we'll set up a conference call.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, next on the agenda, wastewater committee. I'm still pretty much at the same place when I reported on wastewater at the our last committee meeting. To refresh all of you, Sanibel had to complete 3 consulting projects before we would have an understanding of the total cost for Donax to process all Captiva wastewater outside of South Seas. They first had to do a study to verify that the existing pipes running the breadth of Sanibel Island were large enough to carry all of Captiva's effluent to Donax. That study was completed, and the conclusion was that the existing pipes weren't large enough and that they were going to have to run parallel pipes along with the existing pipes to carry our wastewater to Donax, which was an unexpected cost of about $20 million to have Donax process our wastewater. The next study was to determine the ability of Sanibel to dispose of the increased processed wastewater. Was it going to require some additional investment on the part of Sanibel to get rid of our wastewater once processed? And that consulting study determined that Sanibel would have to create a new deep injection well at a cost of about $25 million to get rid of the increased processed wastewater, which just on the surfaces seems pretty outlandish, to me, that, we would be talking about increasing their processed wastewater maybe 10%. It's kind of hard for me to understand why adding 10% would trigger the need for a new $25 million deep injection well. But at any rate, that's where that stands. And then the third study is the economic study, which is to determine how much of all the existing investment that Sanibel has made in creating the Donax facility, should some of that investment be borne by Captiva people who are going to come in now and utilize that facility versus us just taking a free ride on all that prior investment. So far, in trying to reach out to Sanibel, I've not been able to determine if that study, has even commenced as yet. So I don't know where we are, on, that last study. The problem we're going to have is when that last study is completed and we understand all the costs, we're gonna be looking at costs that are gonna be dramatically higher than what we thought when we put together the first plan to have Donax process, our wastewater, for all of Captiva outside the village. And so where it goes from next is going to depend a lot upon what the findings are about the FGA plant being able to, handle the proposed increase in development at South Seas. There's going to be a lot of other variables come into play here that I think is going to have an impact on us determining what's the best route to go forward. So I hate to kind of give you a report like that, but there's just so many things up in the air. I honestly don't know where we are right now on making this Donax plan work, or if we're going to have to revert back to some other strategy because of all of these costs that surfaced from these additional consulting studies that we weren't expecting.
Jay, do you have a feeling for how much is too much?
Well, no, I don't, because that's going to depend a lot on how much outside public funding, what we get. The whole Donax plan was based upon back in those days. It looked to me like it was going to be an average cost per property owner of $30,000 to $35,000 to do Donax. This was back like 3 years ago, based on what we knew at the time. And, we did a straw poll of the community and had very high level of support at a cost of $30,000. But, if this gets up to say $75,000 or $100,000, I don't know. If that starts becoming, in my mind, very expensive. It starts exceeding dramatically the cost of putting in a new septic system in one's property. But then you don't know what kind of public assistance we might get to bring that back down to something like $30,000.
Yeah.
Well, it's sort of like this may be not something I'm not supposed to say, but the cost of living on our island is how many millions do we put on protecting one side? How many millions do we put on protecting the other side? And how much money do we put into pumping out the floods, et cetera, et cetera?
Right.
And when does the rate of return on all of this seem like whatever?
Yeah, that's a difficult analysis. I'm pretty sure that if we, added up the total property values of everything on Captiva, you'd come up with a very big number that you'd be willing to pay to save all of that investment we have in Captiva.
It's like 1.5 billion, but if we're paying on an ongoing basis, because there'll be ongoing costs. I mean, I'm not saying to abandon Captiva. I'm not saying that at all, but the numbers start and how much of the value of the island is the land versus just our homes. It's, I don't know, existential questions.
Look, I think the sewer issue, central sewer issues is gonna, we got some setbacks because we had variables that we didn't control and didn't know about. Jay's right. One was the increase in cost to do the Sanibel connection. And the other is this open-ended question of what's going to happen at the FGA plant at South Seas and what kind of development the South Seas is going to have. If we're going to have overdevelopment in South Seas, are people not going to want sewers because they're going to think it means more overdevelopment because septics is a natural, limitation on how much you can develop. On the other hand, stormwater surge, storm surge and rising groundwater makes these septics not function. And so I think the sewer issue is going to resolve itself as the South Seas issue resolves itself. And either that FGA plant is going to have to be completely rebuilt or we're all gonna have to connect to Donex, so we're gonna have to find something. But it's gonna get resolved, I guess, along with all these other issues that are all
Right.
overlapping with each other. And so we just have to be willing to watch this closely, to get as much information as we can, and we can make a decision when the time is right.
David, I think that's well said. There's just too many moving parts here right now,
Yep.
you know, to make assumptions about what's going to work best. We just have to see how a lot of these factors play out, you know, over time.
People have to understand that Sanibel contemplated, 400,000 gallons per day, including South Seas, and now South Seas has got, 50% development with bigger condos and more hotel rooms.
Right, and then then how does Sanibel feel about, you know, enabling that kind of increased development by agreeing to treat the effluent?
Well, with the county, do they even have the capacity to do that, or they
Yeah.
to eliminate the effluent, the treated water? And then you have FGA plant. Okay, do you increase and fortify the FGA plant? But then is DEP going to allow, and your Army Corps of Engineers, are they going to allow you to build basically a deep water, like Deepwater Horizon kind of thing in a mangrove forest in the Pine Island Sound? I mean, these are all questions that we can't answer at this point. And until we get a handle on what the development options are, the maximum development, it's very hard to make a decision. I suspect within a year, we're going to have a much better chance of resolving this issue.
I would agree with that.
Yep.
Okay, so any more questions on wastewater?
Yep.
All right, next, iguanas. Are there any still alive, or Bruce, have you killed them all, or what's going on?
Well, the females are getting ready to lay their eggs. So Alfredo's trying to get the big ones, but he's still getting quite a few of them. So
Do we have any feel if we're making a dent in the population, that the tide has started to turn yet, or?
I mean, just visually driving around, I don't see as many as we have in the past, over the past 6 months, 7, 8 months. I don't see as many.
I agree with that.
Me too.
I think that's, first off, Bruce has been killing them all, but besides that,
Yeah.
there's more vegetation. When there was absolutely no vegetation, they were everywhere. Now they're sort of more hidden. Also, we have rabbits back.
Yeah.
We do? The
Yeah.
rabbits have come back?
Rabbits. Yeah. So we're things change, we'll see.
Yeah.
Ken Goodham, could you follow up and make sure we get at least $25,000 back from the county for the iguana trapper?
I sent a letter and an invoice to Wayne's office last month and haven't heard a thing from him yet.
Okay. Don't be shy about following up, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, Development Committee, and very successful, welcome back cruise. I thought it went well. What else do we have planned or need to do?
We don't have anything else planned.
Do we think we have enough money to get through the year?
Well, we did as of the last meeting. So I don't know if Ken wants to chime in, but we didn't have anything else on the books, but we can certainly plan something if we need to. Ken, do you?
We certainly have enough money to make it through the summer. We probably would want to revisit and have a plan put together for the fall and next season, since that tends to be our best opportunity.
Okay, we're through sending out fundraising letters and so forth for this year. Is that correct? And
I wasn't planning to send another one. I think we've
Yeah.
gotten the response we're going to get, and I didn't really want to conflict with the Protect Captiva fundraising.
Absolutely, right.
How did we do? I forget now how we did on the fundraising. Do you remember do you have a?
I didn't pull it for the November through now. the financial update on your packet has what we brought in so far this year, which is about 15,000. And I think we, including the cruise, and I think we probably did the same thing starting in November. So probably about 30, but I can get you better numbers next month.
But Ken, looking at your financial update, it says cash available for 170. Is that assuming that we pay off all the funds that we would owe Sanibel's consultants for doing the sewer studies?
The only study we have outstanding we haven't paid for is a $60,000 one.
Is the what one, Ken?
60,000? I'm not sure. I've lost track of what that's paying for. I apologize.
Well, the 60,000 one would have been the one that resulted in the deep well injection recommendation, I think. I think Raftellus was only about 10 or 15,000.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I was billed a $45,000 one for the last study, and Sanibel has not asked for anything else. So I thought there was still one out there.
There is still one out there. There were two studies that were done by Tetra Tech. One for effluent and one for the pipes. And those are two separate studies. I think, so you paid two already?
Well, I paid the $45,000 one, and I think that was the pipes.
Yeah.
I think they're still working on the effluent.
Okay, so right, and then there's a $25,000 or so for the Raptalis financial study. So those are monies that came from the county that are going to the consultants through Sanibel, but they're not money that we had to raise ourselves.
Right.
We raise it ourselves to the county, but that's not our voluntary contributions. So the question I'm asking you is, does the 170 include any monies from the county that are going to end up being transferred to Sanibel?
$60,000.
So we really only have $110,000.
Yes. And then some of those are still escrowed slightly because they're supposed to be spent over a number of years. So the breakdown is of the cash on hand, we have about 55,000. I need to go back and make sure that that's accurate. I think I've moved everything over of money that was long-term gifts or long-term donations. But even with that, we're still looking at over $100,000 in accessible cash right now.
Okay, all right. So
Okay.
that would get us through the summer. And then I guess we do our fundraising letter the beginning of the end of the year, right?
Yeah, we'd want to look at doing another cruise if that was something you desired, and doing another fundraising letter. And if there's anything else, our three fundraising arms without those two and the golf tournament, and obviously the golf tournament's a non-starter when there's no golf course.
Yeah.
So
okay.
but we certainly have the funds to get through the summer and into the fall, unless you have extraordinary expenses, which I don't think will happen. And by then we should start looking at kind of where we are with some of our other plans and what we need to be raising or targeting.
Ann and Ken, if you could just, I mean, are we saying that we want to raise we need 100,000 a year? I mean, if we can get a sense of what we need on an annual basis to run the panel productively, that would be helpful. And if we're saying it's 100,000 a year we have to raise, then we can figure out how to do fundraising associated with that. But
If you look at the expenses, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
We have a couple of year actual expenses that would give you a feel for what it's been costing us to run the panel. That's varied from 50,000, essentially 50 to 100,000, depending on what other contributions we've done or what other committees are running.
Okay.
So you kind of have to also, that's why we don't want to say administration is going to cost you this, Zoom's going to cost you this. We can isolate those costs pretty easily. And then it's, what else do you want to do that year? And here's the money you're going to have to raise to accomplish it.
Yeah, basically, if we don't undertake major projects that we have to pay for ourselves. So for example, say we couldn't get Lee County to fund the stormwater project and we had to pay for it ourselves. But as long as we don't have projects like that, I mean, basically, the cost of the panel is the cost of maintaining Ken, and then a few sundry things like communication materials and things beyond that.
Yeah, and the only other thing that right now has been in cost is the iguana reimbursement. Since we're spending, almost $50,000 a year on that and hoping to be reimbursed, but until we are, that's a cost that we're absorbing.
Hmm.
Well, to your point, David, I'll meet with Ken and we'll look at kind of the average expenses and what we see moving forward and talk about, if we need to do something after August.
Okay, very
Or-
good.
Yeah, I mean, Jay as well, yeah. So yeah, we'll do that and we'll report at the next meeting.
Okay, very good. I think that completes our agenda. Does anybody see anything I've missed? Do we have any comments from the audience that need to be addressed, Ken?
Most of them have been addressed as we go. There were a couple of comments about traffic and iguanas, just saying that, yes, traffic is a problem, and yes, we do, people are still seeing iguanas. So,
Does anybody else on the panel wish to bring something up for the meeting? No. No, all good. Okay, how about a motion to adjourn the meeting?
All right, motion.
A second?
Second.
Any of those violently opposed?
See you later,
All
Jay.
right,
Thank you.
Thanks, Jay.
Thanks, Jay.
see you all next time. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.